DogWorks Radio is sponsored by Alaska Dog Works. Check out their website at alaskadogworks.com.
You can support this podcast on patreon.com/firstpawmedia.
This episode of the podcast is brought to you by First Paw Coffee Company, specializing in private label premium blend coffee. If you're serious about coffee, you should check it out. First Paw Coffee's passion is high-quality, small-batch roasted coffee. They take the extra time to taste and get everything perfect before they release new blends. They aim to bring you a cup of happiness each time you pour yourself some coffee. Find out more at ak.dog/free and enter for a chance to win some First Paw Coffee prizes, a book from our collection, and tote bag. One winner will be selected at random each month. That's ak.dog/free.
Social distancing, which kept many people healthy during the pandemic, has been a disaster for some of the dogs they adopted as companions to comfort them during those lonely days at home. Sweet pandemic puppies, deprived of the socialization and experiences they need to learn good behavior, have grown into unruly teenagers. Owners are calling for help, and obedience classes are filling up across the country. Trainers are worried that overwhelmed owners won't stick with the necessary classes and will turn over their dogs to shelters. Some rescue groups say they are already seeing that happening. Social distancing are the worst 2 words you can add to a puppy's life, says Randy Shuchat, owner of Anything is Possible in Chicago. But that's where we are. We have to figure out how to move forward.
From First Paw Media, sponsored by Alaska Dog Works Professional Canine Training Center in Anchorage, Alaska. This is DogWorks Radio, committed to families and their dogs to build lifelong and fulfilling relationships. Visit our website at dogworksradio.com. Now here are your hosts, Robert and Michele Forto.
Hello and welcome everybody. This is DogWorks Radio and I'm Michele Forto, the lead trainer at Alaska Dog Works, where we help humans and their dogs have better relationships. On today's episode, we're going to talk about how the pandemic is causing problems for puppies. I know, right? A few weeks ago, we did a show similar to this that we called Pandemic Puppies, and you can check that out over on dogworksradio.com. But today, we are diving deeper and learning just how bad it can be for dogs that don't get the socialization skills during the pandemic. Let's jump into it. Dee Hout, Chief Executive of Applause Your Paws Canine Training Center in Miami, says she sees the lack of socialization of pandemic pups all the time. A recent case was a 9-month-old golden doodle who arrived at training class with his human family in tow. His owner, a mother of 3 children, got him as a puppy during the wave of dog adoptions and purchases that the pandemic unleashed. But today he is no longer that cute little fluff ball. He's a 50-pound adolescent who, having missed out on normal interactions with the world, is explosively reactive to every other dog he sees, Hout says. He was not exposed to anything, and so he just can't cope. Hout goes on further to mention he's at the point now where if they try to take him out on and walk him, he's too strong on the leash and he barks at everything. Today, that family is enrolled in training with the intention of keeping the dog, something trainers say many owners are doing instead of abandoning the dogs to shelters. But with people going back to work, camp and school and other activities, trainers say they are concerned about the next 3 to 6 months when pre-pandemic normal life begins to rev up. While big shelters in cities such as New York and Los Angeles are not reporting increases in the number of dogs being surrendered, some smaller nonprofit dog groups in Michigan, Colorado, New York, and other states report upticks already. A typical case, says Wendy Weisberg of Secondhand Dog Rescue in Rochester, New York, was that of a young woman with no dog owning experience who got a terrier mix during the pandemic for companionship. She recently gave him up to the rescue group, saying she just couldn't keep him. He cost too much and was getting too wild. She'd kept him in her apartment, where he got so little exercise and socialization that he began jumping around and eventually broke his paw. Weisberg says, now healing from that injury and getting socialized in a foster home, the dog is up for adoption again. He doesn't have any idea about other dogs or other people, Weisberg says. Shoe Chat says, it's understandable that many people thought the pandemic was a good time to get a dog, but now they're blaming the dogs for behavior that the pandemic and our actions during it helped to create. People say, you got wild and crazy, and I give up, Shoe Chat says. It's scary. If you're not committed to these dogs and they have severe problems, we know where they're going to end up. Behavior problems are one of the biggest reasons dogs come to shelters, not just in pandemic times, says Maria Wicks, who heads virtual training for Dog Trust, a British nonprofit group partnering with Animal Care Centers of New York City to offer online classes. Many of the problems, however, can be solved through training if owners are willing to commit to it. The problems tend to show up in dog adolescence, which lasts until they're about 18 months old, sometimes longer depending on the breed, and which is where many pandemic pups are now. This phase has always led families to seek out trainers because dogs go through a secondary fear period as their bodies enter maturity. A natural process that can undo the behavior of even perfectly trained pups, much less those deprived of the normal interactions in their early months. As more people are vaccinated and begin to return to pre-pandemic lives, getting a dog through adolescence has become even harder. Pet owners, like everyone else, are leaving home more frequently to work, play, and travel, and suddenly being around every 3 to 4 hours to walk a pandemic pup isn't quite so easy. When people do take the dog out for a walk, once quiet streets and parks are now busier, full of people, cars, and other sights and sounds. All of these things, to a dog who has never experienced them, feel strange and scary and compound the behavioral changes of canine adolescence, trainers say. As Shoe Chat's company calls for training help with adolescent dogs are up and unprecedented to 100%, she says. Even with 65 classes a week being offered across 6 locations, there aren't enough spots for all the dogs who call needing help. Demand is also up in New York City, where requests for training help, once balanced between puppy owners and adolescent dog owners, are now decidedly in favor of the wilder teenager. It's usually 50-50, Wicks says. Now it's 3-1 with adolescents. The 2 most common problems trainers report are reactive behavior, a classic response to poor early socialization and lack of exposure to all kinds of things, and separation anxiety as owners leave their dogs alone for what may be the first time in the dog's life. Reactive behavior is what happens when a dog jumps onto a person who walks through the front door, or growls at a friend who joins the family at the kitchen table for a meal, or lunges and barks at other dogs while on a leash. In such cases, humans often respond by disciplining the dog instead of understanding that the dog is displaying a behavior that can be adjusted through training. For instance, if a dog reacts badly to something while on a leash, it doesn't mean the dog is aggressive or aggro, as a lot of you like to say, but it can look aggressive, says Sarah Taylor, Director of Animal Behavior Training for SPCA in California. And if you apply a consequence to that, like pulling on the leash, you can make it worse. You're confirming that the thing they're reacting to is actually negative. In fact, you want to change their emotional response so they don't feel negative about what's in the environment. Separation anxiety, Taylor says, tends to show up in dogs as salivating, pacing, barking, urinating, defecating, and being destructive. Dogs who have lived their whole lives with their humans at home can become scared when the people leave, even for what to the people seems like a short time. Humans may come home after a half hour to find that the dog has scratched the molding off a door frame or torn into a sofa. For some people, having that occur even once makes them think the dog is no longer right for them. We've seen a lot of separation anxiety. There have been several couches that died during the pandemic, says Aaron Jones, executive director of Moms and Mutts, Colorado Rescue, which has had double the number of dogs returned so far this year compared with previous years. Owners can make separation anxiety worse by forcing a big scheduling change on the dog all at once, such as returning to work full-time without a couple weeks or months even of getting the dog accustomed to being alone for gradually increasing periods of time, trainers say. Jones adds that when people come in to surrender a dog saying, well, they're going back to work, we try to offer alternatives like doggy daycare or dog walkers, but people just aren't taking it. Taylor suggests that pet owners who will be returning to a life where they're not at home as much can start by making sure that there's a safe area, such as a den for the dog. It can be a room or a crate, somewhere that the dog enjoys going with high-value enrichment items, things like a bully stick or a stuffed Kong, Taylor said. The owner can be home, but the dog is confined away from the owner. You can also play music, DVDs for dogs. You're setting up a time daily so that the dog has practice being alone. Alex Bierman is working on separation anxiety with her Labradoodle, Sydney, which she got in early February during the darkest and coldest days of the pandemic. She and her fiancé were mostly staying at home, and it seemed a good time for the extra companionship of a cute puppy. We weren't totally locked up, but we weren't going out and doing things, and the dog had little exposure to the outside world, the 30-year-old Chicagoan says. Now, when she goes out, Sydney will sit at the window and watch me and bark, she says. He'll sometimes bark and cry. Bierman is taking Sydney to training classes and getting tips to help him adjust. Just bringing him to a big box store where dogs are welcome so he could see people and new objects was a big help when everything else was closed or snowed in. Bierman also is learning what trainers say is often the case. If the dog acts out, it doesn't mean it's a bad dog or the behavior is irreversible. Training, both for the dog and the owners, can help everyone do better in a new situation. And as society continues to reopen, Shoe Chat says dog owners should expect new challenges to arise. Today's adolescent dogs will be growing into maturity as human lifestyles continue to change during the pandemic's shifts. This is a big moving target, she says. I hope people commit to these dogs. We need to find a way to keep these dogs in homes and happy. We want to thank Kim Cavan of the Washington Post for this story and used by permission from the Dog Writers Association of America.
We're living in uncertain times. If there is one thing we can be thankful for, that is the recent pet adoption boom. Shelters are being cleared out, and that means you may not know much about your new best friend. Alaska Dogworks virtual and on-site classes are the best way for you to build a lasting bond and learn about your pup, new or old. From setting up a proper routine to learning the commands and much more, Alaska Dogworks provides you with the resources to develop your dog into one of the best. Right now, Alaska Dogworks has an exclusive offer just for our listeners. Go to alaskadogworks.com now and use promo code DOGWORKS and save 20% off your training program at the time of your booking. Visit alaskadogworks.com and use promo code DOGWORKS to save 20% today. That's AlaskaDogWorks.com and use promo code DOGWORKS at the time of booking.
All right, guys, if you've got a pandemic puppy, seek out some advice from a dog trainer. That's the biggest takeaway from today's show. It's now time for our calendar of events. For those that are listening locally on KVRF or our current and past clients, stay tuned for important announcements. For our other listeners, stick around and maybe you'll learn something cool. Coming up in June, there is a lot going on. There are month-long observances. It's National Foster a Pet Month, National Pet Preparedness Month. This month, timed for the first month of the hurricane season, urges people with pets to make preparation in case they should be hit by a disaster. And that includes making plans for what you would do with your dog in case of a hurricane, tornado, flood, or other natural disaster. I want to add in, it's a good idea if you are in an area that is prone to forest fires to consider that as well. It's National Microchipping Month. It is also June 1st will be International Sheltie Day. We are continuing with much success in our group classes in the park. So far, we have had massive turnouts each time we have had class. I want to give a shout out to all of our clients who continue to come out and not only support Alaska Dogworks by showing up, but you're also supporting your dog. You are giving your dog an opportunity to prove and expand on the training that you've undertaken. So give yourself a pat on the back as well. The group classes are held at Wonderland Park in Wasilla at 11:30 in the morning on the basketball courts. These are free for our current and past clients and are part of your training package. If you are not a client or just want to check us out, this is a great way. We do have a nominal drop-in fee. And we are gathering gear for our first ever nosework class and tri-ball. And Robert is going to do pack walks again too before the summer runs out. If you want to get an idea of what those events look like, head on over and watch The Pack on Amazon Prime Video. It was a really cool show. Do you know that every Wednesday and Sunday night we do a Facebook Live event at 7 p.m.? Be sure to check us out. If you miss those live broadcasts, you can always tune in to those later too. You can find them again on Alaska Dogworks Facebook page. Also, stay tuned for information about the Summer Festival, how you can train your dog to run in the Alaska Dogworks Dryland Derby this fall, and much more. As always, you can keep up to date by following us on our social channels. Just search Dogworks Radio, and for more training tips and tricks and to learn how to schedule a free discovery call interview to talk with us about how to make your dog one of the best, visit AlaskaDogworks.com. And, one last thing you guys can do for me is tell your family and friends about our podcast and encourage them to listen. While you're at it, ask them to subscribe too, and then they will never miss an episode. Remember, I'm Michele Forto, and you've been listening to Dogworks Radio. See you next time.
This episode of the podcast is sponsored by First Paw Coffee Company. Learn more at firstpaw.coffee.
From First Paw Media, this is Dogworks Radio. We hope you enjoyed this podcast, and we invite you to subscribe in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts. You'll find a link on the episode notes. You can tap or swipe on the episode cover art, and you'll see some offers from our sponsors. You can support our show by supporting them. If you like what you have heard, we would love it if you could give us a 5-star rating and tell your friends how to subscribe too. Your hosts are Robert and Michele Forto. Our producer is Robert Forto and created for First Paw Media.
Did you know that Alaska Dogworks trains service dogs for those in need throughout North America? Each and every service dog that is trained through the Lead Dog Service Dog Program and Michele Forto and her team has an individual training plan. We train for autistic, mobility, psychiatric, and PTSD for our soldiers for service work. If you know of someone that may need a service dog, please take a moment and check out Alaska Dog Works on social media and at alaskadogworks.com.